Hello, and welcome to our video about modern thought in AP European history. So, we'll dive into some different art movements as well as kind of new beliefs in psychology and different movements during this time period. Here's a breakdown of what we'll cover. We'll look at modernism in general, and then we'll spend some time looking at different art movements in the kind of mid to late 19th century. So, realism, impressionism, post impressionism, and cubism. So, let's get started with modernism. So, what exactly is modernism? At its core, modernism is a sweeping movement that embraces and grapples with the rapid changes brought on by industrialization, urbanization, and a lot of new scientific discoveries. It's this period of kind of self awareness and questioning established norms. And crucially, we're going to see the development of psychology during this time period. One of the most significant figures who challenges long held scientific and religious beliefs during this period is Charles Darwin. And his work, the really famous work on the origin of species, is published in 1859, and it alters humans' understanding of itself and its place in the natural world. So he takes that idea of natural selection through evolution and applies that eventually to, or people will use it to apply it to people. But you can see here, the Darwin finches on the right. His idea is that, the fittest of the species are the ones that will survive and have the dominant traits, and that, lesser traits will go away over time. And those will be kind of the natural selection process. So, this is important to note that his ideas are highly controversial and met with significant resistance, particularly from religious institutions. Many Christians will see his theory as directly contradicting biblical accounts of creation. Now, there's two new schools of thought that will develop during this time period: positivism and irrationalism. So, positivism is championed by figures like Commenti, who are believed that science alone could provide true knowledge. And it emphasizes this, observable data and empirical evidence as leading to new understandings of society through the scientific method. And then, kind of in contradiction to that, we've got irrationalism. So it's a philosophy that rejects strict logic and realism, placing a greater emphasis on the human mind, intuition, and feelings and instincts instead. One of the most famous rationalist thinkers is Friedrich Nietzsche, who you may have heard of before. And he represents a lot of the same views that these other irrationalist philosophers are going to think about, but just this idea that, the world is really changing and traditional religious and moral frameworks no longer really provide meaning in a rapidly changing world. So it causes him and others to really question the church. They question what they know, and you go more off of this like feeling of individualism and like what you feel is right rather than kind of traditional moral standards. Another groundbreaking figure during this time is Sigmund Freud, and he's known as the father of psychoanalysis. And his significant contribution is the concept of the unconscious mind. He argues that our thoughts, feelings, behaviors are often driven by unconscious desires or conflicts that we're not aware of. He uses things like dream analysis and free association to explore those ideas, and he lays the foundation for modern psychotherapy. And Freud's theories really challenge Enlightenment emphasis on rational thought and reason, suggesting that humans are not always in control of their own minds. And his work has a profound impact on literature, art, and kind of the understanding of humans during this era. We also see the development of a lot of scientific thought during this time period as well. It's where Albert Einstein kind of develops his theory of relativity. We see quantum theory being developed, and even like Marie Curie looking at radioactivity. So we see kind of an emphasis on that more advanced scientific method, thought, reasoning, and especially a lot of applied mathematics that go with those things. Which brings us to the development of realism. Now, realism is a direct reaction against the idealized and often emotional themes of romanticism. So, realist artists are going to seek to depict life as it truly was, focusing on everyday subjects and often the harsh realities of industrial society. They're trying to portray ordinary people and mundane scenes with accuracy and detail, often with a critical eye towards those social issues, kind of like what you see in the picture here, showing that hard labor. And we can see that style here with the two artists that we're looking at, Millet and Corbett, just using everyday laborers. They're showing the work as it is, that it's hard, They're not trying to romanticize anything about it. They're trying to give you the kind of realistic view of these people and their everyday lives. We can also see this with the development of realism in literature during this time period as well. So Charles Dickens is a good example. In Great Expectations, A Christmas Carol, Tale of Two Cities, he's looking at the life of the poor living in industrial Britain. And it's very realistic portrayals of the hardships that they endure. And then we also see in some of our realist authors, like Tolstoy, we see the development of psychology in the portrayals of the people in the novels. So, like, for example, in War and Peace, he dives a lot into the psychology of the characters, like, why are they doing what they're doing? What are they thinking? And it kind of represents some more of that modern thought we talked about earlier. After we have realism comes the Impressionism art movement. The Impressionism movement starts around the 1870s, and Impressionists are less concerned with precise detail and more interested in capturing the fleeting impression of a moment, particularly the effects of light and atmosphere. They often paint outdoors, directly in nature, and they love to capture nature kind of as they see it in that particular moment. And their style involves a lot of very visible brushstrokes and unblended colors. The first person we'll look at here is Edouard Monet, and he is kind of that bridge between realism and impressionism. So his work kind of dips into both. Like you can see from the first picture there, where the woman's at the bar, it's kind of showing her at work, in a Parisian bar, uh, showing life. And then you get the bright, vibrant color that is kind of noticeable in the impressionist movement below in the flowers. The most famous Impressionist painter is probably Claude Monet, who's a French artist, and he's known for painting nature exactly as he sees it. And his paintings really embody that Impressionist goal to convey a momentary subjective perception of light and color rather than a detailed photographic representation. It's about how the scene feels rather than just how it looks. Our next artist is Renoir, and he's known for his vibrant depictions of social life and kind of everyday pleasures. This one in particular, you can see his use of like dappled sunlight filtering through trees that creates senses of movement and joy. And that's kind of like typical of his work. That's kind of what he's known for. So you kind of feel like you're in the moment with all of these people, kind of seeing the light and everything exactly how they would. And then finally, we have Edgar Degas, who's also a French artist. Like I said, most of these artists are going to be French from the Impressionist period. And he's best known for depictions of ballet dancers, and he's credited with a lot of new techniques to capture body movement. So these ballerinas that he paints, they look like they're in motion in a dance move. And he's going to use a lot of pastels in his art rather than just like paints. And it's going to influence later artists like Picasso and Matisse. Okay, so after Impressionism becomes Post Impressionism. So post impressionists are going to move beyond simply capturing the visual impression. They're more interested in expressing emotion, symbolism, and more structured approaches to the art. They often are going to use bold and unnatural colors and visible brushstrokes to uh, like display their inner feelings and build a more kind of solid image. So our first artist we'll look at is Georges Seurat. He's a French artist. Again, most of these painters are going to be French. We see his one of his most famous works is the A Sunday Afternoon over here, kind of displayed for us. But he uses a lot of distinct dots of color to make his work, and they're kind of his strokes are all really tiny and separate and too small to distinguish. You can see it's a lot more like physical of a painting than the ones that we were seeing before. Now, the most famous post-impressionist is probably Vincent van Gogh, and he's a Dutch artist. He's going to use a lot of those striking colors and bold brushworks, and he creates almost 2,100 different pieces of artwork in about 10 years' time. And he's really influential to artists kind of around the world. But he's a great example of how he uses that color and brushwork to show kind of the intense emotion and inner turmoil he's trying to create. And while the blues and yellows he's using aren't like in Starry Night, for example, they're not like super realistic, but they're used to create that powerful emotional impact, which is really kind of key in that post-impressionist movement. Our last post-impressionist artist we'll look at is Edvard Munch, who's a Norwegian artist, and he's also known for using intense colors and abstract, mysterious themes in his art. But kind of, against what Van Gogh's doing, his work is looking more at kind of the uncomfortable human emotions that we have sometimes, like anxiety and isolation. You can see in The Scream, his most famous work, his use of like swirling colors and the intense colors kind of give you that anxious feeling looking at it that the person in the piece is experiencing themselves. And his work's kind of controversial because, people don't often like to experience those things while looking at art. And then the final artistic movement we'll look at is Cubism. So, Cubism, as you can tell from the two images you've already seen, is very different from the artistic movements that come before it. It's inspired by a lot of different things. It's inspired by Native American art, African, and Micronesian art. And it's this whole concept of like analyzing objects by shattering them into fragments. So, not always cubes. I mean, it can be different shapes, but you're using geometric shapes to analyze what you're looking at. And there's two kind of like themes that emerge from that. So, you've got analytical, which is like basic geometric parts in two-dimensional. And then you've got synthetic, so the use of collage in creating art. And the most famous artist of the Cubist movement is going to be Pablo Picasso, who's a Spanish artist, and he co-founds this Cubist movement. And his work is really interesting because he really changes the course of modern art. And he shows that modern art doesn't have to be a literal representation of reality. It can be kind of subjective interpretation, and it can be kind of whatever you want it to be. And that's going to be a very different idea from the work that we've seen from all these other artists. He also creates an astounding amount of work. He creates close to 20,000 different paintings, prints, and sculptures. Okay, so that's the end of our time today, but hopefully you should walk away being able to see that art and culture and kind of like different intellectual movements are happening at a rapidly changing pace in the late 18, early 1900s as we build up to World War I. We're not just staying at a stagnant period where we see the same type of art and culture happening, for decades at a time. It's kind of like a very evolving thing right now. Okay, thanks for watching.